I never told anyone why I quit my job. All I know is I'll never forget the smell, like ash and death, and the feeling of being watched. Always watched, no matter what I did or where I went. It was wildfire season in California, and there was a burn doing its thing not far away from the state park I worked, Castle Crags. Maybe you've heard of it. Well, if you're in NorCal, you might have. Honestly, it's gorgeous there. Not enough to make me go back, but gorgeous. Anyway, it was fire season, which meant that even if nothing around me was burning, everything still smelled like it was burning. Ash was everywhere in this fine gray fall, like God dumped powder on everything. We all wore masks when we were on duty, but there's nothing a mask can do about the smell of fire and burning pine. Felt like I was licking the bottom of an ashtray when I came in from patrol. It wasn't like we had a lot of people in the park at the time. It was that we were patrolling for signs of fire, or worse, vandals who might want to cause more fires. I don't know what it is about fire that brings out copycat arsonists, but it was something we had to worry about. I swear, people are worse than the bears sometimes. Those were a worry too. Animals coming down from other areas to get away from the fires. And like I said, nothing where we were was actually burning, and we were working hard to keep it that way. Didn't mean that some bear or mountain lion wasn't going to set up shop in our park and create problems once the tourists started coming back. Nothing says snack to a wild animal like tents appearing in the wilderness. Sorry I sound bitter. I'm surprised I still am. But maybe it's because being bitter is better than being afraid. I don't want to be afraid. Doesn't mean I'm not. Not every time I smell wood smoke. There's that primal fear, it just hits you. And after listening to your channel for a while, I think I know why. Like I said, fire season. Still had to work. So I did. I went out, made sure there was nothing happening on my assigned trails. It was quiet. The weird kind of charged quiet that happens when something bad is happening, but it's not right in front of you. I had the patrol that went along the main trail to Lower Loop Campground, and yeah, I saw a couple of kids out there. I swear. Stupid games, stupid prizes. They had a couple of heavy backpacks on, which gave me a good reason to detain them. I checked their packs, found flares and lighter fluid, and that was more than enough. I radioed the station once I had them cuffed for someone to come out with a jeep and haul them in. That meant a nice wait out in the great outdoors, with the air quality going absolutely south and my eyes stinging from the particles in the air. And of course, it had to get worse. I still remember how the radio crackled and I heard the report of Ranger missed the check-in. I felt cold. I can't even say I was surprised since visibility was garbage, and if I didn't know my trail as well as I did, it would have been easy to get lost. If he was lost, easy to fall and get hurt too. The ranger who got lost, I'll call him Jim, because if he ever finds out I outed him on YouTube, he'll be mad, was checking out the Pacific Coast Trail campsite loop, which was directly to the north of my position. We were friends. I radioed in that I'd go look for him. Once the station sent over a jeep, and we packed the teenage wannabe arsonists into it, we headed for PCT. That campsite was closer to where the fires were, and while the trail was passable, the air was just thick. It felt like I could chew it. It didn't make a bit of difference that we had masks on. The haze was getting worse and worse. It was practically orange and thick with ash particles. There was no way we should be out there. We needed to get to the station, to an oxygen tank, as fast as we could. But not without Jim. Not when I thought we were probably the closest ranger unit available. In this atmosphere, waiting to find him could mean not finding him at all. I told the other ranger to drop me at the head of the trail and get the kids back to the station, drop them off, then come back for me and Jim. I hopped out of the jeep and headed right up the trail. It felt like I was walking into hell. It was eerily quiet. The air felt thick, like I was walking into static electricity, and everything felt, I don't know, maybe the word is ominous. The fires must have been getting closer because it felt hotter than it had down to the south. I still didn't see actual flames, but it almost didn't matter. I called out for Jim, but even with the mask covering my face and filtering the ash, it was getting into my mouth. I started coughing. The way I was going, I thought he'd be able to find me if he could just hear me hacking up a lung. But I didn't get any answer. Was Jim unconscious somewhere? Had the lack of clean air gotten him? Or had he tripped in this awful haze and fallen somewhere along the trail? If he had, I was sure I wouldn't find him. I just kept thinking he would have come for me and kept going. Maybe it wasn't the smartest thing I could do, but it felt like the only thing I could do. I'd gotten partway up the trail to PCT campsite when I felt weird. At first, I thought it was dehydration, but even though I stopped to grab some water from my flask, I still felt it. God, please don't let it be a disoriented mountain lion, I prayed. You feel like that when one's stalking you, you know. Mountain lions are ambush predators, and I didn't have a dog with me. I didn't want to run into one. I kept going up the trail faster, but checking behind me every few seconds. That really slowed me down. I never saw anything, but I felt eyes on me anyway. Gave me the creeps. Well, more of the creeps. And it was quiet. I couldn't hear anything, not even the wind. Just my own breathing, and my own boots crunching on the dirt. I called out for Jim, for anybody, but that watched feeling didn't go away. Probably not a mountain lion then. That didn't make me feel any better. I concentrated on looking for Jim. Probably didn't help that our ranger uniforms didn't exactly stand out, especially in this smoke. I stopped when I got to the head of the trail just before the loop. Would Jim have gone up there? The air was getting worse by the minute. For a second I thought I heard something. Flames? Jim? I spun around and saw red, but not just any red. Lurid red, thick ruby red, shining in the sooty air like flames. I swear I felt my heart drop into my boots. There was no way I'd live through a burnout here. I didn't have a Nomex shelter. I didn't have anything but standard hiking gear. I sucked in a breath and tasted ashes and sweat. You'll think I'm crazy, but the flames, the red things, they didn't move. They didn't expand or get closer. I couldn't hear the crackle of fire, so I figured maybe they weren't flames at all. But what were they? Jim. I had to find Jim and get out of here. And if I had to go through whatever that was, I'd do it. I took another couple of steps up the PCT, and that was when things got really weird. I can't really believe I said that, but they did. Because those red things, they moved. A lot. There was this whooshing sound and the feeling of hot air hitting me, and suddenly the red things were in front of me, not behind me. And they were about 8 feet away. And they were eyes. I wouldn't have been surprised to see deer, bobcat, or maybe even a bear chased west by the fires. This wasn't any of those things. I don't know what it was, and honestly, I figured the lack of oxygen had finally gotten to me. This thing, I don't know what else to call it, but a thing was big, tall, furry, big red eyes like dinner plates. I screamed. The thing staggered back. I guess it was as scared as I was, but I really wasn't thinking about that. All I was thinking was I had no idea what it was or where Jim was or what to do about either of those things. I was sure I was gonna die, choking on smoke and ash, out in the middle of a state park that didn't seem nearly as beautiful as it had been before. And then I heard it. The beautiful, beautiful sound of a Jeep motor coming up the track. The creature suddenly sprouted wings, freaking wings, and launched itself up and away. It landed about 20 feet away and stared at me again like it was trying to communicate. Well, I'm no mind reader and I don't speak creature, so I had no clue what it was trying to tell me. Hell, I could barely see what it was standing near. The air was so thick. And then I did see something. A boot. Jim. It had to be Jim. I couldn't leave him. But the thing was there. I don't know how to explain what happened next. One minute, I'm staring at this thing. The next minute, it's using those crazy wings, and it's gone. Just gone. I hustled up to where it had been standing, and there was Jim, unconscious and bleeding from his scalp. I radioed the Jeep and told the ranger what I found, but not what I'd seen, and by the time I'd checked Jim for broken bones, our ride was there. We drove fast back to the station. Every breath tasted like ashes and dirt, and I didn't breathe easy until I was inside the station and away from those red eyes. I quit the next day. No 2 weeks and I'll think about it. Just quit. I wasn't ever going back there. My career did a complete 180. I took programming courses and now I have an office job in Sacramento, miles and miles away from Castle Crag State Park and whatever the hell I saw that day. My advice is please stay away from there. There's no guarantee that thing isn't gone. I honestly never thought I'd be writing in to say I had a crazy supernatural story, but here it goes. I am not the kind of person this happens to. I don't go poking around in graveyards. I don't keep an eye out for aliens. I don't even go to haunted houses on Halloween. If you Google the word skeptic, I'm pretty sure my picture shows up in the definition. Or it did. Maybe now I'm not so sure. In my day-to-day life, I'm a certified public accountant. It's a stressful job with a lot of time spent hunched over a desk or staring at a screen, so I usually try to go for long walks or hikes to get the kinks out. I live in Phoenix, so it's easy to get out of the metro area and into the wilderness. This particular day, late spring last year, I was giving myself the treat of a day hike in Tonto Natural Bridge State Park. We'd just gotten through April, and I was completely ridiculously stressed out. It was one of those beautiful clear days when you just need to be outside. Well, if you're me, anyway. The sun was hot and bright, and the landscape looked like someone had put it through an Instagram filter. Really pretty. I'd started early in the day because I wanted to do the Gowan Trail hike all in one shot, and I stopped for a lunch break before noon. I just finished and decided to check the map to make sure I was still going on the right trail up the mountain. It's a rough hike. I'd been meaning to try and get to this particular hike for a few months, but hadn't ever been able to get the time. Probably wasn't a good time to do it because it was hot, but hey, I like a challenge. If I didn't, I'd never get through tax season. I headed out at an easy pace once I'd given myself a bit of a rest. I don't like hiking just after I eat. The scenery is worth walking slow too. It's like something out of a dream, with huge caves to walk through, crumbling red cliffs and pristine streams. It's easy to see why this is one of the best state parks in the state. Like I said, the hike isn't easy and sometimes it's slow going. The day I went, I didn't see a lot of people. I like that, to be honest. I like the idea that I had this park to myself. The workout in the solitude did what I hoped it would do, and I started to feel like I was finally decompressing after the horrors of tax season. I was taking another water break when I heard a bit of noise ahead of me. I thought, damn, I hope it's not a bunch of tourists. I know that's not very polite, but I really wasn't in the mood for company. I wanted to be alone and be able to enjoy how beautiful it was. I heard some scuffling and rustling about 30 feet ahead of me and froze. It occurred to me that tourists might not be the problem. It was summer, but that didn't mean some cougar or fox wasn't about to try to take my leg off for getting near a den or a set of wandering cubs. It could even have been a rattler. I really didn't want to meet one of those. The rustling got worse, and then, all of a sudden, a bundle of gray fur tumbled onto the trail ahead of me. I stood where I was, my mouth going as dry as the dust caking my hiking boots, and did my best not to breathe. Whatever it was, the gray-furred critter made a snarling little whine and dashed back into the bushes. I stayed still for at least 10 minutes, but I didn't see or hear anything anymore. So was it safe to keep going, or should I go back? Maybe I should report the sighting, but I wasn't even sure what I saw, so I decided to wait and see if I could spot any clear tracks in the trail. If I took a picture of the tracks, the rangers would have an easier time identifying the animal. That seemed like a nice, neat idea, very practical, and that's what I went with. I was probably being stupid, if I'm honest, but I had my bear spray with me and my walking stick, and frankly, I'm a big guy. I figured it was a badger or a fox, and it wasn't going to be a problem if I kept going. I kept my eyes open as I kept going up the trail, but I didn't see or hear anything. My gamble was paying off. I'm not usually reckless, so this little bit of it felt pretty good. I was heading into the really rough part of the climb to the summit of the mountain when I heard clattering rocks. That's nothing new, it's a cliff face and rocks fall all the time. But because of what I'd seen before, I made sure to stop and take a look ahead to make sure the trail wasn't being blocked. The trail wasn't. But there was something on the mountain. No, two somethings. The animals had grayish fur. I couldn't tell how big they were at that distance, but I was estimating they were at least human-sized. Maybe. Like I said, it was hard to tell, but the fact that I could see some details, even at this distance, meant they weren't small. I froze and just watched them. They looked like they were communicating with each other, nosing at each other. Maybe they were hunting something, but maybe not. I didn't feel like there was a lot of urgency in what they were doing. The sensible part of me wanted to start backing up, but since the two critters and I assumed they were wolves, it didn't seem to be paying attention to anything but each other. I stayed where I was. One of the wolves, I'm just going to call them wolves, pushed at the other and then took off up the trail at full tilt. The other one yelped and started running after him. I'm guessing it was a him too. It reminded me of my dogs playing more than anything else. Maybe they were young wolves. That was it. They almost reminded me of teenagers daring each other to do something stupid. Whatever else they were competitive. They were running almost neck and neck up the slope, which was fine, I guess, as long as there was one. But that climb to the top turned into an actual, honest-to-goodness climb up a vertical cliff face, and last I checked, wolves weren't mountain goats. I pulled out my phone and tried to film it because, if nothing else, the rangers would find the behavior interesting. And that is where it got weird again. Zooming in meant I got to see the animals better. They weren't wolves. Well, not all the way wolves. Their heads were wolf-like, maybe dog-like. There was all that gray fur and a lot more of it starting to come in around their shoulders. But those were human-like legs pushing them up the mountain and five-fingered hands pulling them up the rocks. Clawed five-fingered hands. I felt like my heart was in my throat. I could feel the blood pounding, but I couldn't move. It was just so surreal. But then my logic came back. There had to be an explanation. Was I watching a movie scene? Was someone filming here? Was some angry assistant producer going to pop out of the bushes and scream at me for ruining their location shoot? That had to be it, right? But nobody else was around and I couldn't see any cameras. I watched through my phone camera as the thing in the lead missed its footing and slipped. It started to take a tumble down the mountain. The other one stopped climbing and tried to stop the lead one from falling. But like I said, whatever they weren't mountain goats. The lead one ended up on top of the smaller one and they went skidding down the cliff face. I couldn't see where they landed, or if they landed in one piece. I put my phone down and I actually started to scramble to where I thought they might have landed, because if I was right and there was a film crew, I wanted to make sure everything was okay. The last thing I wanted to do was report to the Rangers that there was an accident on set. But then rationality kicked in, and I made myself take a look around. I didn't see or hear a film crew, nothing but nature as far as the eye could see. If there was a pair of wounded animals out there, I wasn't qualified to help. If there was a pair of wounded, I don't know what to call them. Things? Creatures? Cryptids? Out there, I didn't want to help. What I wanted was to go home, in one piece. Getting back to the park entrance and the ranger station took an hour, and I argued with myself the whole time. Turn in my phone footage? Forget it ever happened? I mean, what had I really seen? And would telling the truth be way more trouble than forgetting about it? In the end, I erased my video, and I didn't tell anyone. It just seemed like the safest option. So, like I said, I don't have an explanation for what I saw. At least, no rational explanation that makes sense. I just know I'm going to think twice about going back to the Tonto Natural Bridge Park, just in case whatever I saw that day remembers seeing me. My sighting happened back in the summertime of 2013. My uncle and I were up fishing on a river near Montapaka in Quebec. We parked our truck at the end of a road, went down into the woods, and hiked upstream for about 1 mile or so. It was around 1 p.m. in the afternoon. We had just caught some walleye, so we stopped to have lunch under a big willow that hung out over the river. It was very relaxing and we were enjoying the warmth of the sun. The willow tree provided a nice little bit of shade, so we set up our chairs under it and ate our sandwiches. We were filthy and dirty from fishing. I had just taken a bite when I looked up and saw this thing standing on two legs roughly 40 feet away from us. It was moving in a really weird way, which I can only describe as being like a bear looks when it walks upright, but not quite as jerky. It wasn't looking at me or anything, but its eyes seemed to be focused behind me. I assumed that whatever it was after was running off in our direction, but now had disappeared into the woods. The thing seemed to be on a mission, at least that's how I understood it, and at this point I actually did just think it was a bear, and was happy that it was now gone. After eating, I walked upstream in the direction it disappeared, when I heard something large charging through the woods coming towards me very fast from downstream. The first thing that ran through my mind was it's either a large buck or a bear, so I stood frozen, thinking, crap, this is not going to be good. Fortunately, it just came right past me and my uncle, who had also come to the river to wash his hands. I could now see it clearly. This huge wolf biped came rushing at us, but then passed right by us. It was full-on chasing this huge game that was going by. A large elk. Actually, there were two elk, one large bull and a smaller cow. The wolf creature gave pursuit to the larger one. My uncle stood there stiff as a board, and you could hear him breathing behind me. He was completely terrified. Okay, I was too. The elk, both of them, ran into the trees right by where we had parked and eaten. Then this wolf went past us too, and over to that same spot in a rush after them. It disappeared into the woods about 100 or so feet from us, but it didn't stop. You could still hear it running, giving chase, while also snorting loudly as it continued off in the woods. I don't think it saw us crouched down beneath the willow tree originally. Then everything got silent again, and that was the tip-off. That's when we knew we weren't alone. There was another one of these things watching us, a much bigger one, the alpha male. I could hear it breathing heavily, and there was a large cluster of fallen trees right beside us, so I crouched down between some dead wood, and I could see where it was. It was staring at us with its head slightly cocked to one side. It stayed perfectly still. It looked unlike the other one that was shaggier and wolf-like. This one was completely black and much more muscularly built. It made this very odd sound that reminded me of cattle, but on a much deeper scale. My uncle saw it next and he screamed out to me, "We have to go now!" Now that caught my attention because my uncle is usually very calm. So we just threw our stuff in and jumped into his truck, pretty much leaving behind our fishing gear. I knew what this thing was, but I just couldn't figure out why it would be here, in this place. There were 3 more of them already emerging from the trees near where they ran after the 2 elk. I didn't want to think about what else was out here. We got in the truck and drove off back down the road until we came to the paved state road, which would lead us back to town. The city is about 60 miles east from where we went fishing and straight south. When we returned home, I explained to my mother what had happened, as well as some family friends who were interested in hearing about it. They had also apparently heard rumors of a bizarre bipedal wolf living up around that mountain. To this day, I don't exactly have a clue as to what on earth we encountered, even though I had a faint idea, or at least I thought I did. But whatever these animals are, they did not like that we invaded their hunting territory. I should start by saying that I'm not typically prone to believing in stories of strange creatures. I mean, I've always been a serious person with a serious job. I'm a chief warrant officer and I've been in the Navy for 25 years. And I've spent plenty of time out in the wild. I started hunting with my dad when I was 12 years old. I've never been one to scare easily. I've been in combat and had to deal with all kinds of dicey situations. Anyway, me and my buddy Bill like to go hunting wild pigs on my cousin's farm down in Florida. It's a little south of Jacksonville. I would never go alone. It was a 2-person job. One person would man the spotlight and the other would have the rifle. We'd roam through the cornfields until we heard animals rustling around. Then we'd hit them with the spotlight and take our shots. This time I'm talking about, we went out on a night in January. It was pretty cold, probably down in the 40s. We drove out, and then we walked out to a field where we'd known the pigs to hang out. We settled in there to listen. There was no moon, and it was cloudy, so it was just about as dark as you can get. It was just the right conditions to get some pigs. It wasn't too long before we started hearing some rustling and grunting. Bill hit the spotlight and we saw 5 or 6 pretty big pigs. I had my lever-action rifle ready and I fired at the biggest pig and downed him with a shot behind the ear. The pigs panicked and I got off about 3 more shots, but they went kind of high and the pigs made it to the tree line. My ears were ringing and my adrenaline was pumping. I was really wishing I had gotten more than one. We started walking toward the one on the ground, but as soon as I took a step toward it, we heard a scream. It was a loud, angry scream. It sounded like it was close. I was like, "What the hell was that?" Bill looked at me all freaked out. He shone the light around and scanned the open field and the trees at the edge. We couldn't see anything. He started to say something, but we heard the scream again. It seemed closer and louder. It was really loud, but really raspy. Like if you went to a football game and screamed and hollered and wound up losing half your voice. And the next day you tried to scream as loud as you could for 10 seconds. That's what it sounded like. Bill said, "Give me your pistol, we need to get out of here." I had a pistol on me along with the rifle. I handed him my .45, but I said, "What about the pig?" He said, "Screw the pig." We were about a mile away from the truck on a 1,000-acre farm, with some kind of demon thing screaming at us in the pitch black. We started to feel panicky. We found the track we had followed in and started to walk away fast, but we kept turning back to scan the area thinking we were about to see something come after us. Then we heard it again and turned around and saw this thing on the path about 50 feet away. This creature was about 4 feet tall and was staring at us with red eyes. It had spikes down its back with leathery gray skin. It looked hairless to me. It gave us this weird grin, and I swear it looked like it only had like 3 long teeth in the front of its mouth. The hind legs looked huge. It was like we were paralyzed trying to figure out what the hell we were looking at. Then Bill remembered he had the pistol and raised it, and the thing took off into the corn. We finally came to our senses and started running full speed toward the truck. I don't remember if there were any more screams. My adrenaline was way up, and all my focus was on running as fast as I could without tripping and falling. We made it back to the truck and hightailed it back to my cousin's house. On the ride home, we were trying to calm ourselves down. But Bill just kept saying, "What the actual hell was that? No freaking way that was a hog." And all I could say was, "It sure as heck wasn't." We got back to my cousin's house where they had made a bonfire and were standing around it. We must have still looked pretty wild-eyed because my cousin came over and handed us 2 beers right away and was like, "Rough night? Did you get a pig?" "Yeah, we left the pig out there. Maybe we'll get it in the morning." He looked pretty confused, and then we both just started telling him about the crazy screaming, and he said, "Yeah, raccoons can make some really wild noises." Then we told him what we saw, and he seemed to get a little pale. And he started telling us about this weird thing that had happened with his neighbor's sheep the week before. He said almost 10 sheep had been found slaughtered, and they were completely drained of blood with strange puncture marks on their chests. And we could tell he felt weird about saying this, but then he said the neighbor thought a chupacabra had gotten them. I'd heard that word before, but I thought it was just some weird legend from South America or something. And that was that. We got the pig the next day. We felt okay going out there in the daylight, but honestly, I don't know if I'd want to be out there in the dark ever again. I live in a small town in Montana, right up against the Rocky Mountains. It's the kind of place where the wilderness is just a step away, and folks still hold tight to the old ways. I'm a forest ranger, been doing it for close to 15 years now. I know these woods like the back of my hand. But something happened about a month ago that's got me questioning everything I thought I knew about this place. It was late afternoon, and I was out on patrol in the truck. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting that golden light that makes everything look like a postcard. I was driving down an old logging road that hasn't been used in years. It's pretty overgrown, but I like to check it now and then for any signs of poachers. As I'm driving, I notice something strange up ahead. There's this tree, a big old pine, and it's shaking like crazy. I mean, really shaking, like there's something big in the branches. But there's no wind, nothing that could be causing it. I stop the truck and get out to take a closer look. That's when I hear this sound, like a low growl. It's coming from the tree. I'm thinking maybe it's a mountain lion or a bear, so I grab my rifle just in case. As I get closer, the growling gets louder, and I can feel it in my chest. The tree is still shaking, and I can see the branches moving. Then, all of a sudden, this thing drops out of the tree onto the ground. I can't even begin to describe what I saw. It was big, maybe 8 or 9 feet tall, and covered in this dark, shaggy fur. But it wasn't a bear. Its arms were too long, and it had these hands with long fingers and claws. Its face was almost human, but the eyes were too big, and the nose was all wrong. It looked at me, and I swear it felt like it was looking into my soul. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. We just stood there, staring at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it turned and ran off into the trees. It moved so fast, like nothing I've ever seen. 1 second it was there, and the next it was gone. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. I didn't feel scared exactly. More like, I don't know, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I didn't say anything to the other rangers. I know what they'd think. But I did some asking around town, real quiet-like. An old-timer named Earl, who's lived in these parts longer than anyone, told me his granddad used to talk about the Old Ones, beings that lived in the mountains long before people came here. He said they were guardians of the forest and that they could see into a man's heart. I don't know what to believe, but I can't just pretend like it didn't happen. I still go out on patrol, still drive down that old logging road. But it's different now. The forest doesn't feel the same, like I'm not alone out there. Anyway, I wanted to share this with you and whoever else might be listening. Maybe someone else has seen something like this. Maybe there's someone out there who understands what it was. I don't have any grand conclusions or anything. I'm just a guy who saw something he can't explain, but I guess that's how it goes sometimes. The world's a big place and there's a lot in it that doesn't make sense. And maybe that's okay. Maybe not everything needs an explanation. Maybe some things are just meant to be mysteries.